right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Social Zee Franchise Happy Hour. I'm your host, as usual, Calvin Smith, back in beautiful Destin, Florida. We're enjoying the fall weather here and the less crowded beaches, so I'm excited to be back home. But I'm equally as excited to talk to our next guest, Mr. Orhan Veli, who's joining us all the way from Philadelphia, and he's here to share the gospel of salad works. So, Orhan, welcome.
Hey, Kelvin. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. What we'd ask you to do is what we ask everyone to do when we start is, take 60 to 120 seconds and just give us a quick background to help frame the conversation and get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, cool. So I guess some of the highlights. So Orhan Veli, I am an immigrant, came to the United States when I was about 10 years old, and from former Soviet Union, Azerbaijan. And refugee, the whole thing, kind of got acclimated to the United States, grew some roots here. Went to college at Penn State. As soon as I finished, worked in the financial sector at Morgan Stanley. Realized very, very early on, wasn't for me. Approached my dad and said, hey, would you be interested in going into business together? I was fortunate enough to where my father, who obviously, having the whole immigrant background and everything, my parents did not have a whole lot of money at all. But he took a second mortgage on their townhome, and my grandparents took a second mortgage on their townhome, and we borrowed from wherever we could, and I got to start in the quick service industry. Yeah, so that's kind of the start out story. And then today, fast forward, this was September of 2006. And then today we are franchisees with SaladWorks. My dad and I are full-on partners. We have about 10 SaladWorks locations and counting. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
That's awesome, Orhan. Well, what a unique background. So I want to dive into that a little bit. So you came to the United States when you were 10, and talk about that a little bit. I mean, did you speak English whenever you got to the United States? What was school like? And at 10 years old, were you ready to be an entrepreneur? I mean, like what was the process there?
Yeah, so zero English. My name is Orhan was about the extent of what I could say. My parents much the same. So the transition, doing the whole like refugee thing, running away from a place where war broke out and instability and things like that, finding yourself in a nice stable environment was absolutely a blessing. But the process to get used to the way of life here, like simple stuff like learning the language, understanding the customs, everything like that, even for a 10-year-old is a huge task. So you can imagine you go to school for your first day, you don't understand a single word that's being said to you or at you, or you can't communicate. So it's an interesting experience, to say the least. I wouldn't change a thing. I think it ended up shaping me exactly into the person I am today. And a lot of people go through that very experience. It was a couple of years before like I felt like, all right, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second part of your question, in terms of did I know I was going to be an entrepreneur early on? So there's this like little story that I tell people, how I kind of did know that I really wanted to be in business. So back when I was a kid, there was this game, Pogs. I don't know if you know it or not, but it's like these
absolutely
cutouts, right, with the slammers. And so all the kids had them. We were very poor, so I couldn't bring myself to ask my parents to buy them for me at the local grocery store. But we were at a flea market, and at the flea market, they were selling them for like 1 penny a Pog. So I worked up the courage and asked my dad. I said, hey, would you mind giving me $1 so I can buy some of these Pogs? And he did. And we get home, and I went outside, and I talked to a bunch of my friends. And within a matter of probably like 2-3 hours, I sold all these Pogs at 10 cents a Pog.
That's awesome. That's a good return. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that was probably the best return I've had in business since. So I came home and I told my dad. I was like, "Oh, this is," He got very excited, and to him it was like a case study that real life, that he could just kind of be like, "Oh, awesome, let's run with this." We jumped in a car, drove back to the flea market, bought another round with the money that was already came from the profit, and so that was a really cool experience, and that kind of like led me to the idea. I realized that this was a lot of fun. Besides the fact that it was profitable. It was just a lot
Yeah,
of fun for a kid to have that experience. So yeah,
absolutely.
hopefully that answers.
Yeah, no, thanks for going through that, Orhan. And fast forward a little bit. So you kind of went the professional route first. What was it that caused you to decide, hey, I'm ready to transition and not follow the corporate grind for the rest of your life, and took the leap to do something on your own?
Yeah. So if I'm totally honest, like so I started at Morgan Stanley as an intern after my like freshman year of college. So I think that was probably one of the luckiest things that happened to me because it very early on I just realized those couple of years I spent I realized it just wasn't for me. Not because I wasn't good at it. Upon graduating college, I had two offers from different groups within Morgan Stanley to continue with them, and they were pretty good offers. And um, I just really like every day going into the office and just doing that grind. I really disliked it. It was such an effort on my part to make sure that I'm doing the job that is ahead of me. There was zero enjoyment for me, and I kind of the career path was drawn out by the guys I worked with, who were absolutely fantastic people, of what I could do, and it was just seemed so endlessly boring to be like, man, am I really going to have to do this predictable and totally unenjoyable like job for the rest of my life? Yeah, so that was, it was just like, no, that's, I would rather go. Our first place was a cheesesteak place, and I took off a shirt and tie and I put on, a polo, and I cooked cheesesteaks 12 hours a day. And a lot of people, I went to college with were like, what are you doing? You're crazy. But to me, having the ownership of that process, knowing that what I'm doing is totally up to me, right? Like it was a franchise as well, but like the operation on day to day, the people I hire, the tone I set for the business, the sales goals that we're hitting, the management of variable costs that I'm able to do. I felt like it totally empowered that I
Yeah,
can do this. Obviously, being
absolutely.
very young and having the first business experience.
Yeah.
So
So,
that contrast, it was just like I knew it. There wasn't a lot. I wasn't making a lot of money for a long, long
sure,
time.
sure.
It was a lot of debt and very long hours and very little pay. So, but I just really liked it.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. So, September of 2006, Orhan, how old were you then?
I was 22.
22, and
Yeah,
you had a good career path, probably ahead of you at Morgan Stanley.
yeah,
I'm sure your parents were proud of you.
sure.
Excited to see how that was going to go, and then you came to them, and it sounded like your grandparents as well, and said, "Hey, let's bet the houses literally, and let's
Yeah.
go into the restaurant business." So, how did that conversation go, and what led to you ending up in a cheesecake restaurant, or cheesesteak restaurant?
So, so, uh, so the conversation. I mean, originally it was a conversation with my father and I. My father has wanted to be in business for himself. He Before we immigrated to the United States, we kind of lived in Belarus for a little while, and he had a business that was thriving.
Okay.
Obviously, in a totally unpredictable time, 1990s and
Sure.
the post-Soviet era, it was just but he did really well. He's a mechanical engineer by education, doesn't have a business degree or anything like that, but just using common sense and laws of economics that seemed obvious, he was able to build rather quickly a very great business model. And so once we came over, he went into school, became went into computer science, became a computer programmer.
Okay.
But he also had the passion and wanted to be in business. So that really was the common denominator for him and I,
Yeah.
professionally. And so when I said, hey, I really would love to be able to do this, I mean, I'm sure that was kind of like a fantastic thing. Like, oh, we got this in common.
Yeah.
At the same time, it was a totally scary thing because,
Sure.
like you said, it's like literally betting the house and a lot more. Like the reality was like in
Sure.
conversations him and I had. It's like, well, if this doesn't work out, we're going to spend the next couple of decades paying back these debts. You know,
Yeah.
so that was a very scary thing. And then we kind of narrowed it down. We started thinking, what type of business do we want to be in? And the restaurant business just seemed very obvious. It seemed like, okay, people will always want to eat, and it doesn't necessarily take the highest of intelligence to be able to understand the processes of what a restaurant is.
Sure.
And then we kind of, as we went through the search, I think my father was more of a lead in that. We stumbled upon some franchises that became, we were like, okay, well, we can actually do this. We're in Philly. Cheesesteaks are, a favorite here. So that's kind of how we landed on Charlie's Philly Steaks.
Sure. Sure.
And they had a couple of corporate stores in the Philadelphia area that they opened. They were operational. We could review their books and say, okay, there's a certain volume there. Now we need to plug in, and hopefully we can build from that. So that's how we came to picking up one of those locations and going with it.
Sure. And then what was it? 6 years, Orhan, that you had those, and then what was the transition in saying, hey, we're going to take this foundation we've built, and we're going to go and open 10 Salad Works locations? Like talk to that story.
Yeah. So end of 2006, September 18, 2006 is when first day of like having a Charlie's, and it became very quickly very obvious to me that I didn't have a lot of employees. I needed to build a crew, from get go, and all of these kind of things. So from 2006 through 2012 was just running the cheesesteak place. And in 2012, in May, if I remember correctly, is when we got a Salad Works. Now, in between 2006 and 2012, essentially a 5-year span. We had a huge economic downturn.
Oh yeah.
And I was in New Jersey, Morristown Mall, in the Charlie's, and the first year we grew our sales tremendously. It was fantastic. I was 7 days a week, open to close. But there was a result that was immediate. And then as we went into 2008, it was like one day just the faucet was turned off and the sales stopped coming. There was a Boeing plant not too far from us, and they had a huge layoff, and those people stopped coming for lunch.
Sure.
But in that same food court, there was a Salad Works, and they just kept going.
Okay.
And that was the thing. I was like, man, this is so interesting. Even though we're experiencing this, somehow they're not. And that's kind of when the light went off, right? Like that little, oh my God, this is an amazing brand that has an amazing following, and they serve food that is genuinely really good. It's good for you, and it's good to eat, and all of that kind of came together, right? So we were no longer in a situation where we were just like looking to break into a business, and we were kind of like, all right, well, what works best? Now we were looking and saying, okay, well, what works best economically, and what do we like as a whole? And
sure.
That's kind of how Salad Works came on the horizon. And then if you fast forward, that was 2012. We picked up another Salad Works in 2015. It took a few years to pay off the debts that we took for the first Salad Works, save up enough for a down payment, find financing, all of those kind of things. And then so we got a second location, and in that same year, Salad Works declared bankruptcy.
Oh wow.
And it was very scary, but at the same time there was kind of like we were so confident in the brand itself, in the food that we're serving, in our customer base, that it felt like, this is the time to like really kind of move all in again, because the idea is, buy low, sell high. This was the low, and while a lot of people were very scared, we were like, okay, we really believe in this. And then from there on, it was 2016, we picked up another location, 17, 18, it just escalated from there.
Sure. That's great. And so through that transition, as you got into the Salad Works, so you started your cheesesteak business, your partners with your father, you're in the restaurant at least 7 days a week, if not, every hour. And how has your day-to-day and your engagement and your role in the business changed through those years, Orhan? Obviously, running 10 locations, you can't be there, every day. And, what's been your path and your personal journey as a, just professional growth?
Yeah, it's changed drastically. I was absolutely, elbow deep in all the operations. And now I have to run a management company that runs the businesses, right? There's a huge
Sure.
difference in that. Now, again, I'm very lucky because my partner's my father, who's had a lot more life experience, and from very early, like when it was just me running one store, and economically we could not hire a decent, general manager. It just wasn't possible. But his vision was always like, look, we're doing this to scale, and if we're going to be scaling at some point in time, we have to make sure that we build in systems where each one of these locations is going to be able to work on their own. I mean, that was like
Right.
way premature to us actually being able to start doing these things. But as time went on and we're, had second location and third, and it was like, all right, well, okay, operationally, what do I do? So my father handles pretty much the office and the background, the bookkeeping, the payroll services, all of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then the operational side is on me, right? So that was kind of the process where I was like, okay, well, in order to run 3 restaurants, how do I make sure that even though I'm not there, the customer service is top notch, the quality of food stays top, and the first answer to that is training. You have to hire the right people. I guess hiring the right people is the first answer.
Sure.
And then ongoing and continuous training, right? So building those systems that will allow you to have great crews in place, great people in place to provide those kind of high quality customer service, high quality food. And then obviously the other part about it, which is kind of the secondary, but it's just as important, is managing your labor costs, managing your food costs. Those things, if you mismanage them, you can just kill a business very, very quickly.
Sure.
So now I think my job today, as opposed to what it was a little over a decade ago now, has shifted to where I'm the person on a day-to-day making sure that our staffing is correct. We did have the right hires. There's a marketing project that's happening in each location. There's a couple of district managers or area managers that are involved in what projects they're handling, what training is being done, and so on and so forth. It's a ton of work and it never stops.
Sure.
But it's a lot less hands-on. I'm not the guy making salads. I'm not the guy cutting the lettuce.
Sure.
But I make sure that there is a guy cutting lettuce and doing it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. Orhan, which was scarier for you, or which one, was a more stressful period for you personally? Was it, leaving Morgan Stanley at 22 and launching into this thing, knowing that your family is now depending on your success, or was it, transitioning from, the owner, operator, and all the above to, hey, we're going to start scaling this thing and jumping in with new locations?
Calvin, that's a really good question. Both. I mean, I can't even separate to say one was more. Like, obviously, if I had to do that jumping into business from scratch now at the where I am today with the responsibilities that I have today, I have 3 kids, wife, they're all and with the realization of what the true cost of failure will be, I don't think I'd be able to do it now.
Sure.
And I always think to myself, man, like my father kind of taking that gamble, like that's, wow. But I didn't, at 22, I didn't truly understand what that meant. It was very stressful, without a doubt. And it was like, nerve wracking, and man, it was really hard. But and I didn't know I was going to be working 70 plus hours every week for years on end, and there's not going to be an income for a long time. Like, I didn't realize that at 22. But I think if you do it 22 until the 22 to 27 is the fantastic time to do it, because you don't have a whole lot of responsibilities. You got more strength than you know what to do with. You've got more energy than you know what to do with. You recover very quickly, so that part of it was, while it was incredibly stressful, incredibly difficult to do, I think my youth was the saving grace there.
Sure.
Now, transferring from running one location to multiple. So when I went from 1 to 2, right, I would, on a daily basis, come in, do all the prep in one location, and then jump in my car and drive 45 minutes to the other location that I knew that their lunch staff was a little weaker, and get them through lunch, send people on breaks, then jump in the car, drive back to the other location to get them to dinner, because they didn't, and I did this juggling act for like some time. And I remember, a few months of doing this, like nonstop. I was at a traffic light, and like I either dozed off or didn't pay attention. I kind of bumped the car in front of me, and that was kind of like that moment of awakening, right? Like I don't have point. I don't get tickets on my on my driver license. I never caused any accidents, and all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, in a very stupid situation, I did this, and I kind of sat there and I logicked through it, and I was like, I can't do this. I just physically cannot keep up with this kind of grueling schedule, and I need to change something. It was very helpful because at the same time, my father was telling me like, hey man, hire people.
Yep.
And my retort was like, well, we don't have enough money. Like but he was like, look, just hire people. Even if we're just going to be breaking even, we need to have people, and this is the only way we're going to be able to get it done. Relinquishing that control was incredibly tough. Best thing that could have done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and I love the people we work with. I absolutely, there's this like trust system. We run like with the managers, general managers, operations managers. We run an open book. Our P&Ls are open to them and things like that. So it allows I really like when somebody becomes a general manager today. I literally like hand them the keys and you're driving this car. I'm going to be in the passenger seat. I'll make comments and directional, but like really, you're the person driving the car, and I trust you to do it. And I, very glad that happened because that's the only way to scale.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's something that a lot of us that own franchises or just business in general, Orhan, that we that scares us at this point, right? So we've established a business, we're doing okay, things are going well. And the next step has to be handing over the keys, as you described it. Obviously you've been successful at it now with all the locations and everything that you're doing. You mentioned people and hiring the right people. What are the things that you look for now, and what have you seen in people that you bring on work well, and what have been some of the hiring mistakes that you've made that you now use as kind of a guide going forward?
Yeah, so it's hard. It's very, very difficult whenever you sit, you have an interview with somebody. Let's say you're hiring somebody for a management position. You look at the resume and it could be, really good, and there's lots of great experience and everything like that. And you have, 40 minutes you have a conversation with the person, and they seem to fit the bill and everything. And they come in, and you realize, this is not going to be the right fit. Not because they can't do the job, but because maybe their attitude isn't exactly what you need in your company, and maybe they'll be a great fit somewhere else. So every single time we go through this process, and the last 2 years have been somewhat difficult in terms of hiring, right? Like it hasn't been as straightforward as it has been in years prior, especially we've continued to grow,
Sure.
And I know a lot of our colleagues, they're in a space where they're saying, oh, I'm going to cut hours because we don't have the staff to keep our stores open. And we're in a space where it's like, oh, we're going to add more stores despite all of this. So it puts a lot of pressure. So I guess the candidate I love to find and I always look for, it's a person who's not counting the hours. It's a person who is interested in truly solving the equation, right? Like truly getting to the results that you need, whether it's if it's a prep person and they're saying, hey man, this amount of prep, instead of spending 5 hours, I can actually do it in 4.5. And here's what I figured out. I love it. I will sit there and listen to a person and say, okay, well, walk me through what you're doing. And just because I haven't thought of it, right? But this person has, it makes me so happy in thinking like, oh, we brought in a really good, intelligent, resourceful person who can teach me something. And that's across the board, right? Any position that you have, especially in the management positions. And we feed off of our management staff, the people that I work with who can really develop our company, right? They bring in their own vision, and a lot of times it's like you take these tools and you apply them to how we operate the business. I love when we have people that come along with us and they kind of share in that vision of like they're not counting the hours, or it's like, hey, can you help over here? And the person just says, yeah, absolutely. And they're not worried about like, oh, is there additional compensation for that? And those are the people who end up achieving the most within our company and going the furthest. Yeah. But it's hard to narrow that down, right? Like if you minimize this to like a half an hour, 45-minute interview, I couldn't tell you. I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Orhan, what's next for you specifically, and within SaladWorks and just within your overall empire in general? Like what's on the horizon for you, not only for 2023, but the next 3 to 5 years.
That's a good question. Yeah, so we always think about that. I mean, 2023, we're actually have another couple locations of SaladWorks that we want to bring on. Um, and hopefully they'll be just as good as all the previous ones have been to
Sure.
us. I think we're going to take a little bit of time to really kind of work on the processes within our own business and make sure everything is as streamlined as it should. Um, Make sure that we are still able to, have the same level of precise control that we've always had all the years prior. Um, the kind of claim to fame in terms of running, within our own franchise has been like we've been really good at being able to manage our variables in a very precise way. And I want to make sure that as we scale, we continue that to that same precise, and that's been a difficult thing. You can't be 10 places at once. You can't be at 15 places at once, even less.
Yep.
So, so that's kind of 2023. We're gonna take some time. We are gonna do another couple locations, but we're gonna take some time to figure things out in a better way. And then beyond that, we're probably gonna continue growing with SaladWorks. We'll love the brand, but not we'll see if other opportunities come across that are interesting to us, and they're gonna be challenging. Not in a way of like difficult challenging, but challenging like fun. We'll absolutely look at them, and we'll absolutely think what else we can do. But yeah, growth. I absolutely set on figuring out what is going to be the next thing in terms of growing and
Yep.
how we can do it and how we can scale further.
Yeah, absolutely. Orhan, last question. What are you working on to improve yourself personally? What's on Orhan's checklist for personal development right now?
Yeah, personal development is very important, right? Because each one of us, we all have like dogmatic ideas that we just live with, whether it's business wise or family or just, and it's re-examining that all the time, right? So I find it's best. There's a lot of literature, there's a lot of books, and a lot of people who are way smarter than me that have written them, right? So my idea is all the time I have, if I'm driving around, and I do a lot of driving around, there's an Audible book that's playing, and I'm trying to get through it, and most of the time it's not fictional literature.
Sure.
It's whether it's history or philosophy or things like that allow you to kind of think a little bit bigger, think a little bit, grasp things that maybe aren't on the surface. And that helps a lot. I mean, I think just in terms of like managing people, right? Like that's such an intricate part of what we do. And it's a difficult thing. It's genuinely difficult to find that common ground with people that are so diverse, so different. But knowledge and that's what helps. So
Yeah,
that's, on the personal side, that's what it is. It's that continuous
absolutely.
kind of growth and knowledge.
Good. Any audibles or books in general that you would recommend right now? Anything you've read recently, or just a favorite?
Yeah, so there's a book that I'm reading right now that's kind of quite interesting. So it's New Geography of Jobs. It kind of dives into like the difference between, we were a hugely industrious country, and we had all these, with car manufacturing and all sorts of other manufacturing, and now we've shifted to technological and essentially manufacturing of ideas, right? And it's a very interesting description of, kind of looking through a little bit of a different kind of glass and understanding what is happening, how it's happening, what the positives in that are, what some of the drawbacks are, and things like that. So good book. Haven't
Awesome.
finished it, but
And
so
it's
far so good.
The Geography of Jobs. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Well, Orhan, want to be respectful of your time. Thanks so much for joining us, and awesome to hear your story. Every time that we hear a story like yours, it really is, not to be cliche, but it is the American dream, right? So,
It is. It is the American dream. You're right.
yeah, so
It's not cliche.
yeah, congratulations, man. You should be very proud of what you've accomplished. We're excited to get to talk to you, and hopefully, this time next year we can visit again and hear how the new locations are going and how, the improvements and all the things internal are going as well. So thanks so much for joining us.